Shalom, everyone. We're in the 42nd chapter of the book of Beshirit, that is Genesis. Last week we read about Yosef. The last several weeks we've been reading about Yosef in Mitzrayim. Last week we read about him becoming governor, basically, of Mitzrayim. We read about how Elohim worked in his life and through the lives of others around him to create a situation where his name was already, from the way I read it, was already known to Pharaoh when he was told there's a certain young man, a certain youth of the Hebraic lineage who's a prisoner over at the house of Potiphar. And he can interpret this dream for you because he interpreted mine. But the cupbearer told him. And already Pharaoh, he called for him. He didn't say, what's his name? He said, go get him. Send somebody to go get him right now. Now we're going to take a step away from that in this chapter for a second. And we're going to see what's happening with Yosef's brothers and father back in the land of the Canaanite. Because when Yaakov saw that there were food rations to be had in Mitzrayim, he said to his sons, why do you keep looking at one another? Now I hear, he went on, that there are rations to be had in Mitzrayim. Go down and procure rations for us there, that we may live and not die. Okay, so here's an old man saying to his sons, what are you wasting time for? By this time, Yaakov is elderly. His sons have been raised. Their sons have pretty much been raised. Actually, some of their sons have been marrying age and then died. There's a plethora. Israel is beginning to, it's on the doorstep of becoming a people of its own, of our own. And so he looks at these men who are now the elders of the camp. He says, why are you just staring at each other? Did you learn nothing from me? The whole time I was raising you, did I let you go hungry? And this is going to kind of be a bit of a theme that we're going to come back to later in the chapter. But it says, here he's asking, he says, you know, it reads as I have heard, but I read it as, and I kind of get the feeling it was more like, even I've heard this. I'm an old man sitting in my tent. I probably have to have help getting out of bed in the morning. And I've heard that there's food to be had in Mitzrayim. So why are y'all sitting around the campfire staring at each other, asking each other what to do? Be men, okay? Be men. And I was rereading this. It was convicted. The next time I do a men's conference, and I'm talking about the indecisiveness of the modern man, and how modern men tend to wait for somebody else to tell them what to do instead of being decisive and doing what needs to be done, which is how we were made to be. I think I'm going to go back to this story and point out, here was Yaakov, who was walking close with Elohim, and he knew what needed to be done, but he couldn't physically do it. And all these sons that he had raised were sitting around the campfire staring at each other. And I think that's the generational gap that we have today. We have elders in ministry who know what needs to be done, and we can't do it all. Okay, I'm not a young man anymore. I'm not terribly old, but the arthritis has set in. Okay, a little earlier than it normally would because I've had the spinal injury, but even at that, I'm not too many years away from having a full head of gray hair, I promise you. Okay, or maybe a bald head of gray hair. I don't know, but I'm not balding too much yet, so I'm hoping it's a full head of gray hair. But my point is, I'm not too many years away, and I look around at younger men today, and for the most part, I see a lot of indecisiveness, a lot of waiting to be told what to do. Okay, I see a lot of sons sitting around the campfire waiting for dad to give them instructions when they're old enough that they should be leading their own families, leading their own community fellowships, and doing the things that need to be done in ministry and in mission, or in life in general. But it got to the point where he says, go do this so we don't die. That's how far they had allowed it to go. And I see a lot of that, the elders today, especially elders, the elders on my board. I'm the youngest of the elders on our mission board. Okay, and a lot of them are saying to their understudies from years past, it's time for you to step up. And not a lot of that is happening. And what we're seeing is ministries die out that should be thriving because there's no one stepping up to take the lead. There's a gentleman I know who's a minister in an independent church, who is a grandfather working on becoming a great-grandfather. And he's the associate pastor, and he fills in when the pastor isn't able to minister. Okay, when he's out of town or sick or what have you. And I said, where are the younger men in your church? And he said, we have no younger men in our church. He said, we have adult males who never matured into true men of Elohim. He says of God, but men of Elohim. And it's a sad thing because I see that everywhere. And what is going to happen when he and the pastor pass on? I guarantee you it's going to be one more empty building. They might use it for something else, but it's not going to be the congregation that's there now. And that's sad. It says, so 10 of Yosef's brothers went down to get grain rations from Mitzrayim, for Yaakov did not send Yosef's brother Benjamin with his brothers, since he feared that he might meet with disaster. Now, I've heard this preached as, well, Benjamin was the youngest, and he was still a kid. He was not a kid. He was not a kid. He was old enough to, when Yosef was sold into slavery, that they had a bond, a connection, okay? Which means that he was old enough, at least several years old at that point, at least the age of my daughter over here, who knows that her brother well, even though he's off serving in the military now, and talks about him and misses him and wants to know when he's coming home. He was at least that age, maybe older. We don't know exactly what the age difference was between him and Yosef. But at this point, if you do the math, Yosef was 17 when he was sold into slavery. He was 30 when he became governor of Mitzrayim, and he was governor of Mitzrayim for at least 7 years, and then, well, a little and farther enough into the famine that people from other countries are coming to get food from him. So we don't know how many years there. He's at least 37, maybe 40-ish, right in there. Okay, probably not too far behind my age now, which tells me that if he was 17, even if he was 17 when Benjamin was this age, okay, that would at least put Benjamin into his late 20s or early 30s. Okay, so this was not a matter of Yaakov fearing for Benjamin because he couldn't take care of himself. Part of me feels like Yaakov never fully believed the story that he was given about Yosef. Because once before, one of Rachel's sons, one of his sons by Rachel, was left alone with these 10 older brothers, and he did not come home alive. And now Rachel has only left him one other son, and he will not send him. Okay, and so it could be that part of him felt like maybe they did something to Yosef. It could be that he just did not trust their judgment because of what had happened to Yosef. Okay. Thus the sons of Yisrael were among those who came to procure rations, for the famine extended to the land of the Canaan. Now Yosef was the vizier And I tried to look that up, and there's a lot of different debates about exactly what that means. Um, some say governor, some say it's more like viceroy. But he was very high up. He was the right hand of Pharaoh. It says he was the vizier of the land. It was he who dispensed rations to all the people of the land. And Yusuf's brothers came and bowed low to him with their faces to the ground. When Yusuf saw his brothers, he recognized them, but he acted like a stranger toward them and spoke harshly to them. He asked them, "Where do you come from?" And they said, "From the land of the Canaan, to procure food." For though Yusuf recognized his brothers, they did not recognize him. Recalling the dreams that he had dreamed about them, Yusuf said to them, "You are spies. You have come to see the land in its nakedness." A lot of people look at that, and I've even read so-called scholars, and I have to question their scholarly credentials when they read that, and they said, but there's nothing in any of the dreams that it talks about them being spies. It's talking about the the dreams of the stars, the sun, moon, and stars bowing down to him, and the sheaves of grain bowing down to him, not about them being spies. Okay, and if you read it, I mean, it's to me it's pretty clear, and yet these people who write these commentaries say that it must mean this, but it doesn't line up. It says, but they said to him, "No, my lord, truly your servants have come to procure food. We are all of the sons of the same man. We are honest men. Your servants have never been spies." Well, at least half of what they said was true. And he said to them, "No, you have come to see the land in its nakedness." And they replied, "We, your servants, were 12 brothers, sons of a certain man in the land of the Canaan. The youngest, however, is now with our father, and one is no more." But Yusuf said to them, "It is just as I have told you, you are spies. By this you shall be put to the test. Unless your youngest brother comes here, by Pharaoh you shall not depart from this place. Let one of you go and bring your brother, while the rest of you remain confined, that your words may be put to the test whether there is truth in you. Else by Pharaoh you are nothing but spies." And he confined them to the guardhouse for 3 days. I've heard preachers stand up and say, and I've heard believers who kind of skim through this say everything from, how could he do that? Those are his brothers, to, well, that's not much retribution. You know that old saying about don't judge another man until you've walked in his shoes? He could have just set off with all their heads and sent a message for his father and Benjamin, for Jacob and Benjamin to come, and he could have taken care of them. He could have just left them in prison. They had done things that eventually led to him being in prison for a lot longer than 3 days. On the third day, Yusuf said to them, "Do this, and you shall live, for I am an Elohim-fearing man." Now, I've heard it said that they should have heard this, and they should have said, "Oh, he fears the Elohim of Abraham." They said the God of, the God of the Bible, I think is how people usually say it. God Almighty. They should have known right then it was Yusuf. No, because this is one of the few places where I disagree with the exact translation of the JPS. I disagree with the translation of the GPS in that I don't think this means it says Elohim, they capitalize it as God here, and I don't think that's what it means, or how they, I mean, it would have been the same wording. I don't think that's how he was leading them to believe, because he was still pretending to be an Egyptian, a Mitzrayim. Okay, he was still pretending to not be one of them. And so if they're seeing, and we're going to get to the typology of Mashiach in, I think it's in the next chapter, maybe 2 chapters down. But if what they're seeing here is the whole old saying, seeing is believing. Sleight of hand is you see one thing and so you believe it, and then you don't realize that something else is going on. I think there's kind of a sleight of mind going on here. He's playing a psychology. So they've seen him look like a Mitzrayim, okay? And he's behaved like a Mitzrayim, and he's speaking to them like a Mitzrayim. So when he, in the middle of that, says Elohim, they're not thinking Elohim of Abraham. They're thinking the Elohim, the fallen angels who were worshipped in Mitzrayim. Okay? It says, if you are honest men, let one of you brothers be held in your place of detention, while the rest of you go and take home rations for your starving households. But you must bring me your youngest brother, that your words may be verified, and that you may not die. We'll take a second and look at some typology here. This isn't what I was talking about when I said we're going to get to the typology. It gets a lot more vivid in future chapters. So they were held captive for punishment for their sins against him. For how long? For 3 days. And then they were allowed to come out of the ground, out of the dungeon, out of the hole in the ground, as Mashiach came out after 3 days. And they were given liberty as he came out to give us liberty, correct? Not liberty with respect to the law, but liberty as being set free from the price of our sin. Okay? And then he says, let one take the place of all of you and go give this message to the rest. Okay? Do we see a typology of Mashiach here? 3 days in the ground, come out, you're set free, he took your place, go tell the message to everyone else. Everyone else in your family. But are we not all the family of Noah and Adam? And they did accordingly. They said to one another, alas, as we are being punished on account of our brother, because we looked on at his anguish, yet paid no heed as he pleaded with us. That is why this distress has come upon us. Then Reuben, interesting, spoke up and said to them, did I not tell you, do no wrong to the boy? But you paid no heed. Now comes the reckoning for his blood. Okay? And isn't there truth to that? Okay? No matter what we've done wrong, we can think we got away with it. I'm guilty. Especially way back in the day before I was a believer. I did things and I thought I got away with it. And you know what? As a believer, I paid the prices for those things. People said, but after you're saved, after you're in the covenant, it's all washed away. I'm going to tell you, a very wise man once told me, and it has rung true throughout my life, the Elohim of Abraham forgives the sin, not the circumstance. If we commit the sin, he can forgive that, but we still have to deal with the circumstances of what we have created. Now, in this situation, Reuben believes that what is happening is because Elohim is exacting judgment. And to a degree, that's true. What's really happening is the situations have reversed to the point that he is able to, that the person that they did wrong is now in the position to do them wrong. Okay? They don't realize that, but that's the situation they've created through their own actions. says they did not know that Yusuf understood, for there was an interpreter between him and them. In other words, everything he said in Mitzrayim, they were hearing in Hebrew, okay, or Hebrew. They were speaking in Hebrew. The interpreter was turning it into Mitzrayim, but he was understanding everything that they were saying. He turned away from them and wept, but he came back to them and spoke to them and took Shimon from among them and had him bound before their eyes. Then Yusuf gave orders to fill their bags with grain, return each one's money to his sack, and give them provisions for the journey. And this was done for them. But they loaded their asses, with the rations and departed from there. As one of them was opening his sack to give feed to his ass at the night encampment, he saw his money right there in the mouth of his bag. And he said to his brothers, "My money has been returned. It is here in my bag." Their hearts sank, and trembling, they turned to one another, saying, "What is this that Elohim has done to us?" Now, why would they be blaming Elohim? I heard that question asked one time, and immediately I came to my answer. But the congregation that I was sitting in at the time debated it, because it was doing it like in a more of a school setting, more of a shul setting. But my answer was, they're not saying, why is Elohim doing this? Or there's so much as they're saying, what is this that he's done in retribution to us for what we did? Okay? When they came to their father Yaakov in the land of the Canaanite, they told him all that had befallen them, saying, "The man who is Lord of the land spoke harshly to us and accused us of spying on the land. We said to him, 'We are honest men, we have never been spies.' There were 12 of us brothers, sons by the same father, but one is no more, and the youngest is now with our father in the land of the Canaanite. But the man who is Lord of the land said to us, 'By this I shall know that you are honest men. Leave one of your brothers with me, and take something for your starving households, and be off. And bring your youngest brother to me, that I may know that you are not spies, but honest men. I will then restore your brother to you, and you shall be free to move about in the land.' As they were emptying their sacks there, in each one's sack was his money bag. When they and their father saw their money bags, they were dismayed. Their father Yaakov said to them, 'It is always me that you bereave. Yusuf is no more, and Shimon is no more, and now you would take away Benjamin. These things always happen to me.'" When I do marriage counseling, a lot of times when husbands say, "Well, my wife won't be submissive to me," I say, "Well, are you living in a manner pleasing to Elohim? If you are, it should make it easier, in most cases, easier for her to obey you, honor you." Okay? When a wife tells me, well, my husband isn't living the way that he should live, are you? The scripture plainly says that through your testimony, through your lifestyle, you may win him either to Elohim or back to the right path if he's just wandered away. Okay. And then there's situations where parents tell me, "My children are out of control." And I say, are you setting for them a godly example, an example that Elohim would be pleased by? At this point, I think we need to stop and look at the fact that although Yaakov became Yisrael and he became the man that Elohim wanted him to be, throughout the majority of the upbringing of these men, these sons of his, he was not living as Elohim would have had him to live. And he was not obedient to the Torah. And he was not doing the things that he would later do. Okay, he was not the influence on them that he was on Yosef and Binyamin because they were so much younger. So he had a chance to walk 20 years in his faith walk before he was influencing them. And so he's making these comments. These things always happen to me. You always bereave me. You always break my heart. Part of the blame here has to go to Yaakov because he didn't teach them how to be the man that he wanted them to be because he wasn't being the man that he wanted them to be until much later. Then Reuben said to his father, "You may kill my 2 sons if I do not bring him back to you. Put him in my care, and I will return him to you." And I remember the first time I ever remember reading that. I was not a believer yet. I remember reading it. I remember where I was. I was sitting on the front porch at my grandfather's house that never got used because we always used the back door. But I sat out there on the front porch, and I was reading the Bible that he gave me. Well, he told me where to find it because he wasn't allowed me to give it to me, but that's another thing. And I remember reading this, and I said, how on earth could a father say, "You can kill my 2 sons"? Part of me at the time, I thought he must be just so guilt-ridden over everything that he had done. And then looking back, I think, no, he didn't really do anything. He was the one who argued to save Yosef. He was the one who tried to protect him and keep him alive. I think this goes back to what I was just talking about something had been lost. As far as they weren't the men that Yosef wanted, or that Yaakov, wanted them to be. And I'll tell you why. I think it was so easy for him to say, if your 2 sons don't come back, if Shimeon, I don't think it had anything to do with Yosef. I think if Shimeon and Binyamin don't come back, you can kill my 2 sons. Eye for an eye, Dad, eye for an eye. Because Reuben would have been do you remember the story several weeks back? Yaakov was afraid that Esau was going to raid with his hundreds of men their party. And who did he put at the front of the line? Leah and her sons. Actually, it was the concubines and their sons, and then Leah and her sons. But who would have been one of the first to be killed if they had raided? Reuben, because of his age. He would have been toward the front of the line. And I think that, and probably other things throughout his upbringing, caused him to put little stock in the life of one's child. Because, when he sent Yosef out to check on the brothers, Yaakov was concerned about him. He wasn't concerned about the brothers going out and dealing with the wild animals or the raiding bandits. But he was concerned about Yosef. And I think that probably instilled in him a sense that a child's life should be cheap in the eyes of his father. Now, by this point in his life, obviously, Yaakov doesn't believe that because he's mourning over Shimeon as much as he's mourning over Yosef. But it doesn't change the fact that as they were being brought up, that was the example that these men were shown. But he said, "My son must not go down with you, for his brother is dead, and he alone is left." That sounds cold, doesn't it? He alone is left. Sitting here with 9 others of my sons, but this is the only one that matters. I don't really think it was meant as cold. I think he was referring to he alone is left of Raquel. If he meets with disaster on the journey you are taking, you will send my white head down to Sheol in grief. And people can read that and say, so he didn't care about the other sons. I don't think it was that. I don't think so at all. I think she was all that was left. I mean, literally, his name, Yamin, means son of my right hand. Okay, he was the wife that, or she was the wife that he loved. Truly, I think he grew to love the others, but he truly loved Raquel and wanted to marry her. And he was at this point all that was left of her. He's already lost Yusef, doesn't know that he's alive. He's lost Shimeon, doesn't know what's happened to him. If he were to lose another brother, or no, sorry, another son from among the brothers, that would have been 25% of his offspring. A little less because there's Dinah. 25% of his sons would have been gone. And that would bring down the white hair of any man into Sheol. It has nothing to do with favoritism. Not at this point in his life. Do we have a midrash?